Warm greetings from the high 10. It's Everyday Shenanigans, and thank you for joining me. It's about 5 till 12 a.m. here in the high 10, Eastern Standard Time. Almost first day of spring. I hope you all are well and having a great weekend. I want to talk about Jussie Smollett for tonight's live. Pertaining to the appeal process, how will he fare? Will this end after this appeal? Will everything be thrown out as far as the jail sentence, also the restitution and fines? What will happen? Will this all have been in vain, fighting and going to court to prove that this man is a liar, a sociopath? Because I do believe Jussie Smollett is a sociopath. He's a grand liar. He is a grand manipulator. And is it possible that the people who thought they knew Jussie Smollett did not know him? That for many years he has been a liar. He has been a fraud. I was trying to get information to link homosexuality in men to lying. I will give, for instances, in this live, it is not to stereotype or judge anyone, but I will be speaking from personal experiences dealing with homosexual men. And I will also bring you stats on hate crimes. I will also bring you information pertaining to why people lie, why people exact fake crimes, hoaxes. My first source will be Court TV. Thank you for joining me. This is Everyday Shenanigans. I will drop the link later so you can feel free to give your commentary on where you think this case will go in the appeals court and how it will fare in the eyes of the public, how it will be for him thereafter, whether he gets jail time or no jail time. Thank you.
Dan, great to have you with us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And in a lot of the cases that we cover and trials, very recently, as a matter of fact, we've heard a lot about one of our amendments, number 5, the Fifth Amendment. And when I say the Fifth, I know what you think of. No, not Jack Daniels. No, what you think of is the right to remain silent, right? We all say, yeah, he took the Fifth. She took the Fifth. He's not going to talk. Take the Fifth. They arrest you. Take the Fifth. Don't. Absolutely, that is part of the Fifth Amendment. But there's another part to the Fifth Amendment. Let me read it to you. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of limb or life or limb. What's that all about? That's about double jeopardy. It means our forefathers were smart enough to put it in our Constitution that you don't get punished more than once for the same crime. Seems fair, seems right. It's in our Constitution. This is big. This is huge, okay? We don't try people in this country twice for the same crime. Now, let's talk about Jussie Smollett. You saw him right here on the show last night, live, being released from the Cook County Jail. He's got an appeal pending. And we got a real sneak peek at what the main argument is going to be, and perhaps the strongest argument from his defense team. And it all has to do with that Fifth Amendment. No, not the right to remain silent, but the right to be tried only once for a crime. This case has a bizarre, an extremely bizarre, and it played out publicly, procedural history. And I'll tell you what, last night, his attorneys spoke afterwards, and we listened to them. And they said a couple of things. One, they were claiming Jussie Smollett's innocence in the case. I'm like, okay, I'll take that with a grain of salt. You got to say that. You're his attorneys. But then they issued a challenge. And I found this really the most fascinating part of what they were saying last night. It was like directed at kind of like people like me, although we didn't cover the trial when it happened because they didn't let cameras in, and we were in the midst of other big cases here on Court TV. But he really was sending it to everyone who had covered this trial and this case from the beginning, the media, saying, you guys missed the boat on what the real problem is in this case. It's that he was punished once already for this conduct, for what he did. And then there was a second prosecution. Like I just read to you in the Constitution, we're not supposed to do that in this country. So this is a real issue. And you could see it in his eyes as he spoke, his attorney. There was a passion. And sometimes defense attorneys, we're going to have some on tonight, sometimes they can put on a little bit of a show, right? This wasn't a show. This was real when he was talking about this particular issue. Take a listen.
Let me make something clear. There is no room for politics in our court system, and our appellate courts in this great state do not play politics. Let me make something clear. When this case was initially re-indicted, when this case was prosecuted, when this case was sentenced, at each of those steps, I wondered to myself whether Chicago has seceded from the Union. Because in this country, you cannot punish a person twice. And while everyone was focused on the sensationalism surrounding this case, people were not focused on the constitutionality of the prosecution. And we've been trying to tell everyone that it is unconstitutional to charge someone twice. Mr. Smollett paid a $10,000 fine. Let me repeat it again, because our appellate courts are listening. Paid a $10,000 fine and did community service. Now, there's no time machine to go back in time to undo those things. His $10,000 fine hasn't even been returned to him, right? And then you re-indict the case and you give him 30 months probation for a class 4 felony with a man with no criminal record, felony record. 30 months probation, you give him 150 days in jail. You give him what else? You make him do restitution of $120,000, and then you give him the maximum fines. And there's something wrong with that.
Apparently, any citizen in Chicago, if they want to, if they don't like the decision that this duly elected official makes, can saunter into the courtroom and ask for a special prosecutor. I hope every citizen of Chicago realizes how important this case is, because this could be you. You may think, oh, that's ridiculous, I would never do these things that he's accused of. But you can definitely be charged for something you didn't do. You should never, ever be charged again for something that you had already been prosecuted for. It's important. Do not minimize it. It's not a joke.
I hope the media would actually, instead of leaving here today and reporting about how he walked out and what, report on the constitutionality. Should the press, the number one defenders of the Constitution, the fourth arm of government, should you be standing by reporting on how, oh, I think this is crazy, Jussie did this, maybe he did this, as opposed to standing there and asking yourselves in your newsroom, is this right? Could this happen to any one of us? Could someone come by and say, hey, listen, guys, I grew up in Nigeria under military rule. It's dangerous. We're playing with fire. The idea that a person can be charged twice, report that. Talk about that. The appellate court took a look at our motions. We submitted it to them. Focus. Stop focusing on sensational stuff. These are not tabloid papers. Focus on the real stuff. Is it right for a person to be punished twice?
Some people might call me a total whack job.
Oops, sorry about that.
For a person to be punished twice.
All right, I grew up in New Jersey, so when you challenge me, I'm going to accept that challenge. And that's what we're going to do tonight. Now, when we talk about, issues like this, there's really two pieces to it, right? When we make arguments, it's about the facts and then the law, right? Well, the law tonight is going to be really the Constitution, double jeopardy, but you got to understand what the facts are in the case to figure out about what happened here. So let's try to get to the bottom of some of the facts, because I don't think it's 100% clear tonight, but it'll be clear in just a moment, because Court TV legal correspondent Joy Lynn Akron is with us and has been going through everything related to this crazy procedural history in this case. So he's making allegations, and when you listen to him, seems to make some sense,
Yeah.
right? And it has nothing to do with the guilt or innocence of this guy. It has to do with whether or not he was punished once already. So what happened in this initial first prosecution? What were you able to figure out?
Okay, so this is a really, really complicated procedural history, like you pointed out. So initially, remember that this was Kim Fox's office who was handling the prosecution, and then there were these kind of rumors surfaced that Kim Fox was a relative of Jussie Smollett, which she says isn't true, that Kim Fox was in communication with Jussie Smollett, which again she says wasn't true. So she ended up recusing herself. And by the way, she had made statements that she thought was overcharged internally to her office. But about a week after she recused herself, and the timeline, by the way, a lot of this is stated in the prosecution's objection to the emergency motion. They address a lot of this. Then the prosecutor's office actually obtained the jury indictment about a week after her recusal on 16 counts of disorderly conduct. Okay, and then March of 2019, the prosecutor's office then moves to no longer prosecute all 16 counts. They basically just dismiss it, and I guess the Latin phrase is nolle prost, right?
Right, okay. So they decided not to prosecute the case. Under what basis? What was happening at the time? When I was a prosecutor, we indict someone, we want to dismiss the case. Well, maybe we put you into a diversionary program, right? We called it PTI in New Jersey. So we went in front of a judge, and the judge would say, okay, we'll hold this whole case in abeyance. You do X, Y, and Z. You do X, Y, and Z. We'll come back in court, and then we'll dismiss it, and you're good to go. Did something like that happen?
Well, not really. And actually, there's a lot of debate about what did happen between both sides, because the state essentially says, okay, at that particular time, there wasn't the evidence that we needed, that we felt was appropriate to go forward with prosecuting, so we didn't prosecute. So we dismissed the charges. But then later on, they come back, they appoint the special prosecutor, they go forward with the charges.
Right. Okay, so so the first one just gets dismissed because they feel like they don't, so it doesn't get dismissed pursuant to a deal. He's talking about a deal. He said, wait a minute, you dismissed it because I paid a fine, meaning Jussie Smollett, and I did some community service. That sounds like a deal.
Right, it does sound like a deal. It sounds like a plea deal, but that isn't in the court documents. I looked at the court documents, Julia Janae looked at the court documents, many members of our team here at Court TV. That's not in the court documents. What is in the court documents is that there was a $10,000 bond that he paid, and then when the charges were dropped, basically, like, you can keep this. It's kind of like, okay, drop the charges, keep the $10,000.
The fine that he allegedly paid was just not getting his bond back, the $10,000.
Right. So it's not a fine,
right?
According to the state. According to the defense, it was a fine, and so that was a penalty.
Okay.
Serving a sentence. And
how about the community service?
That's another good point. One side says, of course, the state says, he volunteered to do community service. And the other says it was a form of a sentence, a punishment.
So the defense is saying, no, it was a part of the deal, it was the punishment, you have to do community service, whereas the prosecutors now are saying, no, it was like he said, well, I'll do some. So did he do any community service? Is there a record of it? Where does that record exist?
Yeah, well, so there isn't a dispute about whether he did community service. I guess the dispute is that one side is saying that it was a sentence, essentially, right, as part of a plea deal, and the other side is saying he volunteered to do it.
Okay.
So it's kind of in
gray area. We're in gray area here, factually.
Very gray area.
Okay. All right. Anything else we need to know about the procedural history here?
Well, I think that's really the key thing. And so, like you pointed out, if the guy's already served a sentence, a per se sentence, then there is an issue of double jeopardy. Then he can't go to trial again and be convicted again, which is what he did. But the state's saying no.
I can almost pick it's like a backroom deal is what it sounds like.
Yes, exactly. It's like a backroom deal.
Wow. Okay. All right, Joy Lynn Akron, thank you so much. Let's bring in our think tank tonight. In the Bronx, New York, criminal defense attorney Renee Hill. In Houston, Texas, criminal defense attorney Carmen Rowe in green for St. Patty's Day. But I see Frank Sinatra, he's Italian. And in Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney and law professor at Emory University and Georgia Innocence Project board member Molly Palmer. Welcome, everyone. Okay. All right. And I tried to set it up for you guys, trying to get to the bottom of it. There are some facts, I guess, in dispute, but what does it sound like to you, Renee Hill? Does it sound like he's being punished twice for the same crime and may be able to make an argument that this second prosecution should be tossed and the whole thing is over?
It does indeed sound like that to me, Vinny. It is shades of the Bill Cosby case all over again. It sounds like deals were made, the defendant relied upon those deals, and then they turned around and they re-indicted him and ultimately tried him. And it sounds like double jeopardy might actually be a major issue in this case. And let me say this as well. A lot of people are complaining that he's out now, that, he's only out because he's a celebrity. Bail pending appeal is only granted when the appellate court believes that there are viable issues, that there are issues that have merit. So they have looked at these papers and they've made that determination that there is some meat to what they're saying. And that's why he got bail pending appeal, not because he's a celebrity. That's my opinion of this.
Well, yeah. Maybe it's not the celebrity, but it's the ability to do what he's doing. And that really comes more from the money than the celebrity, right? Because he has the ability to hire. Do you see that legal team he's got? He's got an amazing legal team.
He has an amazing legal team who is taking the necessary steps to fight for him as they are charged to do as his attorneys, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that he has, been blessed with the finances from working hard all of his life to be in that position and now use those funds to pay for attorneys to fight for him and point out the issues that every defendant has.
Absolutely.
I've had clients out on bail pending appeal, non-celebrities and celebrities as well. But it's not because of that. When it comes to the appellate courts, it's not because of their celebrityhood. It's because they want to see viable issues, because if they don't, they're not going to grant that bail. Look at R. Kelly. I'm sure he's got more money than Jussie Smollett.
He is infamous. He is not famous anymore. He was infamous.
But at that time, he wasn't out on bail, and he certainly didn't get bail pending appeal after the conviction.
Carmen, your thoughts tonight? Is this double jeopardy tonight?
That's a firm maybe, Vinny. My problem is when lawyers come out and tell me that we need to rely on them to determine whether a deal was had or not, and they suggest that a $10,000 bond is somehow a fine, I feel like we're playing a little too fast and loose with the facts on that case. And so the real issue is whether or not they have anything that memorializes a deal here. Because as a defense attorney, the community service doesn't move me, because I do that for a lot of cases in the hopes of getting a deal. I tell my client to do some things ahead of time and offer it to a prosecutor. If they don't accept it, then I don't have a deal. So this will come down to those fine, detailed facts as to what exactly happened and what those discussions turned into as regards a solid deal. And if they didn't, I think they have a problem when they get to the appellate courts.
Molly, I want your thoughts on this, and then I want you to also answer this question. If he wins on this basis, it's game over, right? This trial, it's over. It's not like most appeals, you win, you get a new trial. No, he wins this one, it's over. There will not be another trial.
If he wins, it's over and it's done, right? So here is what I think this whole thing hinges on. It's the definition of punishment. Sometimes we think about double jeopardy as not being tried for the same offense. Well, that's a different kind of interpretation of the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment. What it also says is that you cannot be punished twice. We see this in multiplicitous charges, duplicitous charges, or in this case, where his attorneys are arguing he already was punished. So if the appellate court interprets the forfeiture of the bond and his community service as punishment, then it's done, he wins, and like you said, Vinny, game over.
Wow. All right, we accepted the challenge. I think we met the challenge.
All right, everybody. Vinny Palatine, Court TV, thanks for joining me. If you'd like to donate to the channel, $ Big Angie, 129 Cash App. I'm going to read you a little bit of information pertaining to my topic tonight. This is an all-inclusive conversation pertaining to Jussie Smollett. Who is Jussie Smollett? Will he win on appeal? What will happen thereafter if he doesn't win? Will he get the jail time as rendered originally by the judge? Homosexuality. I want to touch on that subject as well because he claims to be a gay man. And I'd like to talk on the fact of perhaps his how can I word this? Is it possible that the homosexuality has something to do with him being a liar? Don't get offended. It's just a question. Because I've met a few homosexual men in my time who I learned to be liars. Pathological, some of them. I think back to high school, one Caucasian male who was a friend of mine at that time lied about everything. Nothing was ever the truth. You didn't even know who you were talking to. And what I have to tell myself is today, if I was to meet this said person again, would he still be telling wild stories? Because I think at the age of 16, 17, wouldn't it be a little bit hard to stop lying or not? A lot of homosexual men have been deemed very messy, keep up a lot of turmoil, drama, scream queens. Not all homosexual men have these traits of being liars, storytellers, fabricators, whichever word you like to use. But there have been some very messy gay men who keep up a lot of shenanigans. And you have to ask yourself, is there some type of linkage to gay men and drama? Because it's been a joke running for probably 30 years or so with gay men being dramatic. But lying is a whole nother ballgame, especially when you're talking about fake crimes. I'm going to bring you some information. Thanks for joining me. Very sick situation. Very sick situation. Why do people lie? PaulCayman.com is the source. Why do people lie? Such a simple question should come with a simple answer, but doesn't, unfortunately. There are indications, however, that most of us share the motives for telling lies. Learn to spot micro-expressions is an important key to detecting deception, as micro-expressions often reveal hidden emotions. My data collected during interviews with children and from questionnaires completed by adults suggests that telling lies occurs, at least in part, for one of 9 reasons. Number 1, to avoid being punished. This is the most frequently mentioned motivation for telling lies by both children and adults. It's important to note that there were no significant differences for lies told to avoid punishment for a purposeful misdeed versus an honest mistake. Number 2, to obtain a reward not otherwise readily obtainable. This is the second most commonly mentioned motive by both children and adults. An example of this is falsely claiming work experience during a job interview to increase chances of hire. Number 3, to protect another person from being punished. As with lying to avoid personal punishment, motive does not change with intent. We've seen this occur between coworkers, friends, family, even with strangers. Number 4, to protect oneself from the threat of physical harm. This is different from being punished, for the threat of harm is not for a misdeed. An example would be a child who is home alone telling a stranger at the door that his father's asleep now and to come back later. Number 5, to win the admiration of others. Telling lies to increase your popularity can range from little white lies to enhance a story being told to create an entirely new fabricated persona. Number 6, to get out of an awkward social situation. Examples of how telling lies can look when motivated by this are claiming to have a babysitter problem to get out of a dull party, ending a telephone conversation by saying there's someone at the door. Number 7, to avoid embarrassment. The child who claims the wet seat resulted from water spilling, not from wetting her pants, is an example the child feared punishment because embarrassment. Number 8, to maintain privacy without notifying others of that intention. For example, the couple who claims to have eloped because the cost of waiting was beyond their means, when in reality, they were avoiding the obligation to invite their families. Number 9, to exercise power over others by controlling the information the target has. Famously embodied by Hitler, this is arguably the most dangerous motive for telling lies. And I think we know that from dealing with Mr. Putin. Even more motivation. I suspect there are motivations behind telling lies that fall outside one of the above 9 categories, such as trivial deceits like lies told out of politeness or tact, which are not easily subsumed by these 9 motives. However, these 9 were presented in data I collected myself and can at least be used as the foundation to explain why people lie. Want to know if you've been lied to? When lying, the face often contains 2 messages: what the liar wants to show and what the liar wants to conceal. Often these hidden emotions leak in the form of a micro-expression, a brief half a second or less, involuntary facial expression revealing true emotion. While Dr. Ekman cautions that a single micro-expression or flash of leakage does not offer conclusive proof of lying, micro-expressions are one of the most effective nonverbal behaviors to monitor to indicate a person is being dishonest. The person who wrote this article is named Paul Ekman. He is a well-known psychologist and co-discoverer of micro-expressions. He was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine in 2009. He has worked with many government agencies, domestic and abroad. Dr. Ekman has compiled over 50 years of his research to create comprehensive training tools to read the hidden emotions of those around you. And his last name is spelled Ekman if you need verification for the information. Thank you all so much for joining me. There's a lot going on right now pertaining to Smollett. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what's going on with the Osundiro brothers. Fox News is the source if you need to verify it. I only read bits and pieces because I have a lot to bring you. Attorneys representing Jussie Smollett and his fake hate crime have filed a malicious prosecution complaint in response to a defamation suit filed by Amambola and Alabino Osundiro brothers, who testified they had participated in the elaborate hoax, claiming that one lawyer on the defense team defamed the pair when she suggested they had been wearing white face while carrying out the ordeal. Tina Glandian made comments on NBC's Today Show in March 2019, shortly after Cook County State Attorney announced it was dropping charges accusing Smollett of lying to police about the incident 2 months earlier. And in those remarks, Glandian alleged that the Osundiro brothers, who hail from Nigeria and are Black, might have put makeup on to disguise their color. A judge in Chicago has paved the way for the defamation suit to move forward against Glandian after ruling in favor of the Osundiro brothers' claim that the counselor's comments could have been taken as defamatory, and alleged that remarks were an apparent attempt by the lawyer to dispel the inconsistency in Smollett's story. The attackers had light skin and bolster her contention that the plaintiffs who are not light skinned were Smollett's attackers. That is that information coming out of Fox. Feel free to go to that article to read all of it, because I will not read all of it. But just to give you a brief synopsis, that the defensive lawyers for Smollett are doing, I guess, what you call a counterclaim against the brothers who are bringing the original suit, that their attorney said they painted their faces white. Well, we already know that this is a hoax, a lie. They are Black as midnight, and they are the ones who helped aid this crime. And I don't know that they wore makeup. I doubt that they did, because I don't think they thought they were going to get caught. So they would have needed to put paint on their face, because Jussie Smollett didn't plan this crime out properly. More bullshit on the horizon pertaining to this crazy nonsense. I believe his little friend, she's had something to say. I had the article right up under here. I don't see it now. Miss Tay Taraji P. Sorry about that. Some Bluetooth going off. I don't see it. It was up here at first. I don't know why it's not coming up. Hold on one second. Okay, here it is. I found it. Thank you all so much for joining me. As most of you know, Taraji's had commentary. I'll read something briefly from the Independent, basically saying his crime doesn't fit the time. Okay. As most of you know, he was sentenced to 150 days. He's out now. Trying to pull this article up. It won't roll. On Sunday, March 13th, Ms. Henson said she shared information via her Instagram, #FreeJussie. I'm not here to debate you on his innocence, but we can agree that the punishment does not fit the crime. Of course, that's information I've already brought you. Nobody cares about what Tay has to say, because Tay, to me, is asinine, especially considering she and some other well-known African-American women have decided to rally behind Jussie and this hoax in opposition to the jail time. Well, you got what you wanted now. You fussed and cussed and gone publicly with your commentary, and now the crybaby is out on bond. What is the discussion? Is it double jeopardy? And double jeopardy is pertaining to, it says, crime, punishment, dual punishment. But the gist of the story is that Jussie Smollett never went to a formal trial. So therefore, what his attorneys are deeming as dual punishment, which is probation that he volunteered, from my understanding, which he did even before paying the fine. The fine has been now determined as bond. So which is it? He never went to trial. There was never a formal indictment by Kim Foxx's office. There was never a trial, never a jury. So it can't be double jeopardy because there was never a trial. What it was a backroom conversation between Smollett and Kim Foxx, not put in writing. So if there's no writing, there's no double jeopardy. No trial, no double jeopardy. Just two people conversing. Hey, they know you did it. They think you did it. Do community service, pay $10,000 and you can go on your merry way. And I believe that's what happened. Kim Foxx didn't want to believe that he did it. So she offered him this bullshit ass bond, whatever, however you want to word it. But she had to have known he was guilty or she would have never told him to pay the $10,000 for the fine. You see, she told on herself that she didn't believe in him, or the system didn't believe in him. So you always have to read between the writing. Had she actually rooted for him in support, there wouldn't have even been a $10,000 fine or an offer or an acceptance of community service. And that's the bottom line. She knew all along he was guilty because people were talking. And I believe she told him that people were talking. The detectives thought he was guilty. So to push it under the rug, here comes the $10,000 fine. We'll make it go away. Just pay that little money to the city. We'll keep it moving. But as you see, somebody kept digging and they hired a special prosecutor. And the information led to the Osundiro brothers. And then they concurred. And as I've always told you all, the brothers never had to own the farce. They could have easily lied. That's the part people don't get pertaining to this story. This lie, this faux crime. The brothers could have easily lied. No matter what you saw, no matter what you heard, no matter what you gathered, detectives, it wasn't us. We don't know what you're talking about. That's the sad information. We will see what happens with the appeals. Appeal, however you want to word it. It's all a bunch of bull to me. I want to talk about somebody whose crime was more severe than a hoax and a lie, but the behavior to me is the same. You see, as I've told you about lying, I believe it comes from childhood. And I believe Jussie Smollett lied even as a child or a preteen. and he continued to lie up until January 29th, 2019. I was in Chicago when this certain person stepped foot on Chicago soil and committed a very heinous crime. I was a young woman at the time, working for a very fine department store downtown Chicago, and I would walk to and fro to my job from public transportation, and I noticed a name on a building when I would go by a said landmark. This very wealthy man's name was on the building, real estate tycoon. Little did I know that that name would come back to my peripheral months later when I returned back to Tennessee. I'm speaking of Andrew Cunanan, who murdered this said wealthy man. Andrew Cunanan to me comes to mind when I think of Jussie Smollett. Two gay men who lied to make themselves feel important, to feel validated by others, were not content with who they are, so they had to lie. And sadly, with Andrew Cunanan, he killed people from across the country for whatever sick, perverse reason, and later went on to kill the great Versace, and then turned the gun on himself on a houseboat in Miami, Florida. From gigolo to spree killer, the tragic life of Andrew Cunanan. Andrew Cunanan grew up in San Diego, California, who seemed to be on his way to success. He was the youngest of 4 children, considered to be the white sheep of the family, but he was in the 3rd grade. Cunanan had an IQ of 147, making him incredibly bright for his age. As a teenager, he was accepted to the Bishop School, which was considered one of the top college preparatory schools in the country. After graduating high school, he enrolled at the University of California, San Diego, where he majored in American history. Cunanan seems to be on his way to success. So how did a bright student end up becoming a spree killer? I believe his traumatic upbringing, rejection by loved ones, hatred towards the gay community, and obsession of becoming rich and famous contributed to his demise. Andrew Cunanan was born on August 31st, 1969 in National City, California. While growing up, his parents told him that he's more special and deserving than others, and that someday he will be rich and famous. His parents were subservient and submissive to his needs so he could have the high-class lifestyle they wanted for him. They bought him a sports car, gave him a master bedroom, let him have his own bathroom. However, his parents' marriage deteriorated after his mother, Mary Ann, suffered chronic depression due to the verbal abuse from his father, Modesto. Andrew coped with the trauma at home by telling classmates outlandish tales of his perfect life and bragging about how rich his family is. Fantasy played a role in helping Cunanan cope with the domestic problems he was having at home. He would read novels, comic books, and tell tall tales about how perfect everything was with his family. This is information per Crime Investigation, 2009. In 1988, when Cunanan was 19, his world was shattered after his father abandoned the family. Modesto, a stockbroker, fled to the Philippines after being suspected of embezzling $100,000. He took almost all the money the family had and sold the house from under them. During the same year, Cunanan spent more time partying at gay clubs, which his mother disapproved of. During an argument with his mother over his gay lifestyle, he threw her against a wall and dislocated her shoulder. In 1989, Andrew dropped out of school and moved to the Castro district of San Francisco, a center for LGBTQ culture. I think that Andrew's violent behavior against his mother was due to social learning through observing his father abuse his mother. Social learning theory suggests human behavior is based on learning from watching others in the social environment. This leads to an individual's development of his or her own perceptions, thoughts, expectancies, competencies, and values. By observing abusive behavior from an authoritative figure, he grew up learning that aggressive behavior was acceptable against his mom and probably against others. I also think Modesto abandoning the family traumatized Andrew, which may have contributed to his pathological lying as a way to cope with rejection. Some pathological liars lie in order to gain sympathy. In addition, after observing the verbal abuse his mother endured and the depression she suffered, Cunanan coped by lying to others about how rich his family was and creating a fantasy world for himself. However, his stories became so unbelievable that he was known to be a pathological liar. Cunanan also lied about his poor social background and true identity so he can associate himself with wealthy, older men in the gay community and live the high-class lifestyle he wanted. Obsession with being rich and famous. While in college, he focused on targeting wealthy, older gay men at nightclubs and parties in California so they can provide for him as sugar daddies. He hid his poor social background from these men and created a false identity of wealth and privilege. He was obsessed with being accepted in high society and by wealthy people, even if it meant lying about his true identity. He also spent time selling himself as a prostitute, targeting older and wealthy gay men, and developed a good reputation among them. He was known to idolize Gianni Versace since he was a rich and famous gay man with a luxurious lifestyle. Cunanan claims to have met Versace in San Francisco, although this has not been confirmed. Rejection by loved ones. In 1995, Cunanan identified himself as Andrew De Silva to Norman Blackford, who was a wealthy gay man, and the two later moved in together. Blackford supported Cunanan by buying him a car and gave access to his credit cards so he could buy whatever he wanted. However, in 1996, Blackford ended their relationship when he tracked Cunanan's spending habits and discovered that he was not Andrew De Silva, the son of a pineapple plantation owner he claimed to be. By this time, Cunanan lost his most supportive sugar daddy and no longer living the luxurious lifestyle he wanted. In 1996, his boyfriend David Masson broke off the relationship with him, crushing Cunanan. Masson was someone Cunanan loved very much, but Masson wanted nothing to do with him. Cunanan's friend Jeffrey Trail also broke off his friendship because he was tired of Cunanan's lying and erratic behavior. At one time, Cunanan asked Trail to join him to sell drugs, but Trail refused. Both Masson and Trail moved away from Cunanan and relocated to Minneapolis, which devastated Cunanan. Cunanan has experienced abandonment by people he loved, to include his father, sugar daddy Blackford, ex-boyfriend Masson, and ex-friend Trail. These multiple rejections may have traumatized Cunanan, leading him to feel depressed, insecure, lonely, and vulnerable, which paved the way for his killings. Hatred towards the gay community. In 1997, Cunanan believed he was HIV positive and expressed his fears to a counselor. However, an autopsy on Cunanan proved that he did not have HIV. After believing he may be infected, it's possible he may have developed a hatred towards wealthy gay men for doing this to him. This hatred may have been part of why Cunanan targeted Gianni Versace, since he symbolized a successful gay celebrity. Murders began. In April 1997, Cunanan traveled to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to meet with Trail and Masson to discuss rekindling their relationship. However, they have no intention of getting back together with Cunanan. On April 27, 1997, Cunanan called Trail to come over to Masson's apartment. And when Trail enters, Cunanan beats Trail to death with a hammer in front of Masson. Masson and Cunanan stay in the apartment for 2 days. On May 3rd, 1997, Masson's body was found on the shore of Rush Lake in Minnesota. They were at the shore talking inside Masson's Jeep when Masson jumped out of the vehicle and ran away. Cunanan shot him in the back, turned him over, and shot him in the head. May 4th, 1997, Cunanan drove to Chicago, Illinois, and killed Lee Miglin. And this is the gentleman I was speaking of, who was a prominent real estate developer. Cunanan bound Miglin with duct tape, stabbed him 20 times with a screwdriver, then cut his throat with a hacksaw. After the killing, Cunanan took Miglin's Lexus and drove to New Jersey. On May 9th, 1997, Cunanan killed William Reese, a caretaker at a cemetery in Pennsville Township, New Jersey. Cunanan took William down to the basement and shot him in the head. It was believed that Cunanan killed Reese just so Cunanan can take his truck, since the Lexus was being tracked by the police through its phone. On July 15, 1997, Cunanan killed Versace in front of his mansion in Miami Beach, Florida. Cunanan shot Versace twice in the head with the same pistol he used to kill Masson and Reese. Afterward, Cunanan ran away to a nearby parking garage. On July 23, 1997, Cunanan committed suicide. There was a massive manhunt with about 1,000 agents looking for Cunanan throughout the county. He hid in a houseboat and shot himself in the mouth with the same pistol he used to kill Madsen, Reese, and Versace. Jealousy. Jealousy seemed to play a big part in some of his murders. Not only was Cunanan hurt after being rejected by Trell and Madsen, but he was also jealous of them. They were both successful professionals, while Cunanan's career was not. In fact, Cunanan never really held a steady job since he survived off of sugar daddies and as a prostitute. Plus, their families accepted their homosexuality, but Cunanan's family did not. Cunanan was also jealous of Versace, who was seen as an icon for the gay community. Versace was a rich and successful gay celebrity, which is what Cunanan wanted to be, but could not. Due to the rejection and jealousy of these individuals, it's possible this is why Cunanan killed them. However, some believe that Cunanan killed Versace in order to gain fame and notoriety by killing a celebrity. So even if Cunanan could not be rich and famous through legitimate means, at least he'll be famous for killing Versace. Spree or serial killer? A number of psychologists consider Cunanan a spree killer, while others categorize him as a serial killer. Which one was he? A serial murderer is one where one or more individuals kill two or more victims in separate events. Criminologists have used 3 or more victims to define serial murders, while the FBI lowered the victim count to 2 or more. The time between serial murders, called the cooling off period, is usually months or years, but also maybe days or weeks. On the other hand, a spree murder is one where 3 or more individuals are killed without a cooling off period, which normally occurs at 2 or more locations. I would consider Cunanan a spree killer mainly because he does not fully meet the definition of a serial killer. He did kill 2 or more victims in separate events with a cooling off period, since he stayed in Miami for 2 months before killing Versace. However, serial murders are premeditated and planned, and the offender usually selects victims with specific characteristics such as age, hair color, occupation. In most serial murders, there is a similarity in how the victims are killed. However, Cunanan's murders, there is no pattern. He killed Trell with a hammer out of rage and Madsen with a pistol after he ran away. Miglin was tortured to death while Reese was shot simply over his truck. Versace's murder was planned and premeditated, but the other murders seem more like targets of opportunity, which is why I would identify him more as a spree killer. Was Cunanan a psychopath? Cunanan never underwent a psychological evaluation, so we may never know for sure. However, he did exhibit some behavioral features of a psychopath, but not all. Cunanan has been described as glib and superficial since he used his charm and good looks to seduce older gay men. He was also an entertaining conversationalist who told unlikely but convincing stories about himself in a positive light, believing that the world revolved around him. He exhibited early behavior problems since he started pathological lying at an early age by claiming his parents were rich and telling outlandish stories about himself, which continued as he got older. He was known as an intelligent con man. He was a chameleon since he was a master of disguise and deception. Not only could he change his outer appearance, but he used different names. For each of his murders, he showed little remorse or guilt and showed a lack of empathy. He lacked responsibility since he never held a steady job. All the money he received was from his parents, sugar daddies, and prostitution. Based on his characteristics, I would say he possibly suffered from antisocial personality disorder, APD. APD is a disorder characterized by a history of continuous behavior in which the rights of others are violated. This term is used by mental health professionals to describe a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others occurring since age 15. This definition is followed by 7 additional criteria, any 3 or more of which must be met, such as repetitive lying, impulsiveness, disregard for the safety of others. Cunanan was impulsive with his killings, a pathological liar, had no regard for the safety of others. In addition, while APD by definition always involves criminal behavior, not all psychopaths are criminal, and not all criminals are psychopaths. Cunanan exhibited criminal behavior with his murders, which ranged from bludgeoning Trell with a hammer to torturing Miglin and shooting Madsen, Reese, and Versace. Based on this definition, Cunanan probably satisfies the criteria for APD. Conclusion. As a child, Cunanan was told by his parents that he would grow up to be rich and famous and that he was more privileged than others. He also grew up traumatized watching his father abuse his mother. which led to him creating fantasies for himself and developing a reputation as a pathological liar. He was overly obsessed with being rich and famous, even if it meant lying his way up the social ladder so he could live a high-class lifestyle through wealthy sugar daddies. Cunanan ended up believing he contracted HIV, which led to him later developing a hatred towards the gay community. He was also the center of attention wherever he went and couldn't accept rejection. However, he was rejected multiple times by people he loved, which led to his killing spree. After murdering multiple people, he planned his final kill against Versace with the intent of turning into somewhat of a celebrity himself. By murdering someone rich and famous, this made him feel important. The act of taking a celebrity's life dampened the pain of his reality, which was that his boyfriend rejected him. His father abandoned him, and he never became a member of high society, which has always been his dream. Versace's life represented everything Cunanan hoped to be, but was not. By taking Versace's life and committing suicide after, this made Cunanan feel empowered and assured his place in infamy, since he will be remembered forever as Versace's killer. Our references are Bartle C and Bartle A, Criminal Behavior, Andrew Cunanan in-depth profile of Versace killer, Crime Sheet, Crime Investigation, 2009, a complete timeline of Andrew Cunanan's murders by Harper's Bazaar, Denton E. What really happened with Andrew Cunanan murdered Jeff Trail and David Matson, Harper's Bazaar. Crime Classification Manual, Standard System for Investigating and Classifying Violent Crimes, Academia. Inside the Mind of a Serial Killer Who Murdered Gianni Versace, ABC News. And Rosu, Model 6 Lecture Notes, Boston University. Sites, ebu.education is the source. Thank you all so much for joining me. Winded, but I read you all of that because Cunanan came to mind pertaining to Jussie Smollett. Both homosexual men. I believe they both have the same similarities with the pathological lying. I do believe Smollett has lied many times before January 29th, 2019. I believe he lived in a fantasy world, and one day he woke up to be this thing that we're now seeing unfold and play out on the news and social media and also in the side of the courtroom. A very sick story alike. Why would anyone want to fake hate crime? Many people are hurt and harmed out here each day. Why would he do this? Northeastern.education is the source. This was uploaded January 4th of this year. Set amidst a bitter, divisive U.S. presidential election and a steadily growing Black Lives Matter movement, actor Jussie Smollett exploded onto center stage in early 2019 after claiming he was the target of a late-night beating at the hands of two racist, homophobic Trump supporters. The former Empire's TV star awaits sentencing after a Chicago jury found him guilty, 5 counts of felony disorderly conduct for staging the attack, which could mean up to 3 years in prison. Even as the details emerge, many are still confused as to why the 39-year-old lied about a vicious hate crime, something that remains a constant reality for those in the LGBTQ community and those who are Black or Asian. As humans, we like to look for certain types of explanations for behavior. It's something that we engage in all the time, says Rory Smead, an associate professor of philosophy at Northeastern, who studies spite. There are really only 2 kinds of explanations that people find satisfying. Either they did it out of some ethical or moral good, like when somebody jumps in the river to save somebody. The only other reason we find compelling is a selfish reason, that there's some kind of personal gain or something, Smead says. Smollett claimed he was attacked at 2 a.m. January 22nd, 2019 by 2 men wearing red Make America Great Again. I believe they got that date wrong. It's supposed to be the 29th. Anyway, the ones often sported by backers of former President Donald Trump, Smollett said they poured bleach on him, put a noose around his neck, and beat him up while yelling homophobic and racist slurs. When Chicago police arrived at his apartment more than 6 hours later, police body cam footage shows Smollett wearing the noose. Andre Hope, the lone black juror in Smollett's trial, told WLS-TV that Smollett's claims defied common sense. He remains baffled as to why the actor faked the attack. I still have not figured out a motive for why he did it, why this even had to happen. He was a star, Hope said. The noose Smollett claimed his attackers put around his neck became a sticking point for both Hope and former Chicago Police Chief Eddie Johnson. As an African-American person, I'm not putting that noose back on at all, says Hope. Smollett maintains his innocence, and his attorney said he will appeal the jury's decision. Smollett's high-profile stage attack, subsequent conviction, makes him the latest in a list of headline-grabbing people who have pretended to be victims. Some do it in order to obtain some sort of personal or financial gain. Others claim to have a deadly illness, such as cancer. One woman pretended to be a 911 victim, although she never took any money from the 9/11 victims' funds. It's common to use well-known events or items like Make America Great Again hat because there's an instant recognition. Everybody knows about 9/11 and everybody knows about MAGA cap, says Mark Feldman, psychiatrist who specializes in fictitious disorder, which he believes Smollett has. It's a shortcut to getting the attention that these people are having and the sympathy because there's that immediate recognition, says Feldman, who has not met or treated Smollett. Those who fake victimization for personal gain, such as money, can be diagnosed as malingerers, says Hilmar von Strunk, visiting associate teaching professor of psychology at Northeastern. The medical diagnosis describes people who deceive others, usually physicians, for tangible, understandable gains, such as avoiding military duty or work. But those with fictitious disorder, a similar psychological diagnosis, don't appear to get financial or personal gain, which is a little harder to understand. As humans, we really are very social animals, and we need that human touch and connection. Sometimes, when they don't get that attention, fictitious disorder emerges so they can get that care they're seeking, says von Strunk, who commented on the disorder and not on Smollett's particular case. People with fictitious disorder are often looking for intangible things like attention, sympathy, care that they are unable to get in other more appropriate ways, says von Strunk. This shows a lot of the conditioning that happens in psychology, like making associations between two stimuli. The person with fictitious disorder connects being sick in a hospital with getting a lot of attention, says von Strunk. The fact that Smollett continues to claim his innocence is also in line with the disorder, says Feldman, who has written 5 books about fictitious disorder. I'm aware of literally a couple dozen fictitious cancer cases, and most of them don't ever confess to telling a lie. They'll change their claims over time. 1 year they'll say they have terminal cancer, and 3 years later they're still posting about it. Sometimes they'll claim a miraculous cure. They evoke God and say God cured them, and to question their story is to question God, says Feldman. That's how people have wormed their way out of these lies in a surprising number of cases. Brooks Ayers, a man who dated one of the women on The Real Housewives of Orange County, claimed to be diagnosed with stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2013. Despite their later admitting he faked chemotherapy bills that he had used as proof of his illness, Ayers continues to suggest that he was diagnosed with cancer. There's no face-saving way for them to exit a situation like this, says Feldman, pointing out that Smollett had no logical alternative explanation for his actions. So, barring any other avenue for escape, he's sticking to his story. And it seems that he may have repeated the story so many times with so much detail that it's become what I've called quasi-delusional. He may start to believe elements of it himself. That leads former celebrity defenders of Smollett, such as CNN's Don Lemon, to try and distance themselves from the star's dizzying tangle of tall tales. He had to make up too many lies in order to explain his assault story to police, said Lemon on Don Lemon Tonight, shortly after Smollett's conviction. Lemon, who's been criticized for his involvement in the case, pivoted to another damaging aspect of Smollett's claims. Here's what folks are concerned about, that what he did might undermine future victims, legitimate victims of hate crime, says Lemon. News.northeastern.education is the source. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you, Small Fries. So much to read. The other information is stats pertaining to hate crimes here in this country. I'll drop the links. Anyone would like to give your opinion. But I'd like to know if possibly there's a linkage to gay men being pathological liars. I'm going to go a little bit deeper in this live, but instead of just giving you the information pertaining to the appeal, the double jeopardy clause, bringing up Andrew Cunanan, who's infamous now for killing Versace. He told lies as a preteen and told lies up until the day he shot himself on that houseboat in Miami, Florida. What is the cause of the lying? Is this a gay man's fable? Because as you see, I've come in contact with a few gay men who were known pathological liars, and I'd like to know if there's any type of stat that can back up or bring forth information to gay man syndrome of being pathological liars. And it's not to say that all gay men or people lie in general, but we have to ask ourselves with the storytelling, because I've seen this before. And I think this case with Smollett and this fake crime, Andrew Cunanan with his many, many lies he told, that's why his friends cut him off, and he ended up murdering those same two people. He cut them off because they were tired of him. And that's the whole point. The lies will find you out eventually. And that's what a liar doesn't expect, that the lies will be found out. And I have seen a pattern with homosexual men as pathological liars. So I'd like to know, is there some type of linkage? I tried to find stats. I couldn't find anything. What I did find was, I could barely read what it was. It was fine print. But I searched and searched and searched for damn near an hour trying to find some type of linkage to gay men and lying. But as I said, this is not to say that all gay men lie. But I'm speaking from experience of seeing a few homosexual men spin the wildest stories. And one story I know that's very common amongst gay men is lying about who they slept with. We already know that outing a man can get you killed, be it the truth or not. And many men have told who they've slept with. Don't know if there's any truth to it, but a lot of men have denied it. No, I've never been with him. Possibly he liked the guy and couldn't accept rejection. So he spun the lie that he had had sexual relations with an alleged heterosexual man. That is one rumor you hear a lot with homosexual men, spinning stories of who they've had intercourse with. Why is that? Why do you need to tell the world who you slumber with? And then when I sit here and think of Jussie Smollett, that comes to fruition. Don't you find it strange that in this court proceeding that took place in December, he mentions that he had some type of sexual contact with one of the brothers, who's one of the people who tells that they aided him in this farce. Stay woke. Why would he tell that? These people are telling the world that you concocted this farce, and in your response in court, you would say you had sexual contact with one of the brothers. Bit much. Did you actually think this would show favor to you? You actually think people would say, oh, yes, well, I believe him now, because now he's telling us that he's had sexual contact with one of the brothers. And then he goes on to say that the other brother was jealous of he and the other brother's relationship. What the hell are we talking about? But you see, what I always say to people, that if a person spins a lie, you cannot believe anything thereafter. Because the biggest lie was saying 2 white men approached him and assaulted him. But then 2 black men come forward and says, no, they weren't white. That was us. So why would I believe that he had any sexual relations with a brother? And of course, the brother is going to deny having any type of sexual contact, especially if he's in the closet. Stay woke. Is there a link to gay men being pathological liars? Thank you for joining me. This is Everyday Shenanigans. I'm going to drop the link in case somebody would like to give their commentary pertaining to this case and where this case may go and how in the world did it get to this point, and any type of information pertaining to homosexual men, boys becoming pathological liars and the reasoning for lying. Why? Why must you lie? Thank you for joining me, y'all. If you'd like to donate to the channel, $ Big Angie, 129 Cash App. All super chats are welcome during the live. Thank you all so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. I see you all are talking about pets down there. Oh, so Small Fry says you've seen both lie. Okay. Underlying mental illness. Perhaps there is. Perhaps there is. Why lie, though? What's the point? I'm going to give you some statistics from justice.gov. This is pertaining to 2020. Of the 2020 hate crimes data submitted, 15,138 law enforcement agencies provided information about the offenses, victims, offenders, locations of hate crimes. Of these agencies who submitted incident reports, there were 8,263 hate crime incidents involving 11,129 offenses in 2020. Victims of hate crime incidents, 8,052 single bias incidents involved in 11,126. 211 incidents, a total of 346 victims were targeted because of more than one bias. Religion, 13.3%. Sexual orientation, 20%. Race, ethnicity, and ancestry, 61.8%. Back in 2019, it was 7,103. 2020, 8,052 single bias incidents. It's very interesting. Gender, 75%. Disability, 130. Just some crazy nonsense. Among the 11,129 hate crime offenses, this is 2020, mind you. Crimes against persons, 69.6%. Crimes against property, 28.2%. Crimes against society, 2.2%. Of the 6,780 known offenders, 55.1% were white, 21.2% were Black or African American, 15.7% race unknown. Now, offenders. So there were more white people offending with this bias behavior crimes. Very interesting. 55.5% were white, 21.2 were black, and 15.7 were race unknown. Other races accounted for the remaining known offenders. Of the 6,169 known offenders for whom ethnicity was reported, 39.3 were not Hispanic or Latino, 10.2 were Hispanic or Latino, 2.4 were in a group of multiple ethnicities, and 48.1 ethnicity unknown. Of the 6,264 known offenders for whom ages were known, 89.1% were 18 years of age or older. Most hate crimes incidents, 28.9 occurred in or near residents' homes. 19.9 occurred on highways, roads, alleys, streets, sidewalks. 6.5 happened in the parking drop lots, garages. 4.2 occurred at schools, colleges. 3.6 occurred at parks, playgrounds. 3.4 took place in churches, synagogues, temples, mosques. The location was reported as other, unknown, of 8.6 of hate crime incidents. The remaining 24.8 of hate crime incidents took place at other or multiple locations, but the highest amount was 28.9. The crimes took place near a resident's home. In or near a residence, 28.9. And the 24.8 took place other or multiple locations. Very interesting. Once again, the stats for 2020 pertaining to bias motivation of victims of single bias incidents. 61.8 is revolving race. Religion, 13.3. Sexual orientation, 20.0. Gender identity, 2.7. Disability, 1.4. And gender, 0.7. And if you need an exact amount of people of the crimes that took place against, as for the race biasness, 3,963 and 5,227. Religion, 1,521 and 1,244. Sexual orientation, 1,195, 1,110. Gender identity, 198, 266. Disability, 157 and 130. Gender, 69, 75. Total, 7,103 and also 8,052. So I guess that's a variance of how they wanted to group them. But each had two sets of different numbers, probably on the data that they got and how they could base it. Very sick information. I often wonder if how they view them, and relate to them that causes lying behaviors to build them up. Hello, Joy. How you doing, sweetheart? Thanks for joining me. Small fries, what do you mean? Well, as I've brought you information pertaining to Andrew Cunanan, they believe rejection was the start of his issues of lying. He wasn't getting what he needed at home. Abusive father beating the mother. So here comes the tall tales. Making up stuff. Because at one point he did have a decent life when he was a child before the father abandoned the mother and himself and took off to the Philippines. So he had a good life. But you see that once he had it good, he probably was still embellishing even in that good life to where he couldn't stop making up stuff. So now daddy's taking off. He's having to fend for himself as an adult. He's coming out of the closet. He's hanging around homosexual men and partying. His mother didn't approve of his lifestyle. So now he's sinking deeper into the hole. And so here comes more of the fabricated life. As they said, his parents were subservient to him. They embellished him with, the ideology that he was this great person. You're going to do great things. You're going to be this famous person, wealthy person. So he kept that in his mind even after being abandoned by the father abandoning the family. So now he's an adult. He wants this high life that his parents have said he's going to have. He had a false sense of self. Because as they said, you got to get out here and hustle and work to attain the things you want if it hasn't been given to you outright. But he didn't work. He lived off the kindness of others. And then once he got him a good sugar daddy, the man found out he wasn't who he said he was. He gave a fake name. He cut him off. Then he goes on to meet another man. It doesn't work out. He cuts him off. And then the so-called friend got tired of him lying. He cuts him off. And then those two people go move to Minneapolis, which I thought was very interesting because I'm trying to tell myself, why would his boyfriend, his ex-boyfriend and his good friend, who's no longer a friend, now move to another state together? Were they having an affair while they were dating? One's complaining to the other one about him, and next thing you know, they're both in bed with each other. Now they've cut him off and moved across the country, and Cunanan is feeling some type of way. He hunts them down and he kills them in cold blood. I'm not saying that Smollett has killer tendencies, but what I'm trying to set up for you is a pattern of the lies and the make-believe stories that can lead one down the inevitable path of death. And that's where Cunanan ended up. And perhaps Jussie Smollett has the same dissociative type personality. He has this alternate personality. He doesn't have empathy, because that is one word I read tonight. People who don't have empathy. So they don't have a problem lying to you because they don't care about you. Think about that for a second. When you learn about people who scheme and scam, one would say they have no empathy, because how could they continue to rob and steal and hustle from people? They have no remorse once caught. Now, there are some people who commit crimes that do have remorse, but not all. And we see here with Smollett, he doesn't feel anything because he's still continuing to lie. He's still paying these people to represent him on appeal. So that means he doesn't feel anything because he doesn't care. And if he doesn't care at this point, this late stage of the game, that means this 40-year-old man, as I have already stated, has been lying a mighty long time, and he's going to continue lying. And it's not saying that there's no hope for him, but he would have to repent and redeem himself, and give an apology to the city of Chicago and all those that he has implicated in the lie, and then become a better person. But due to the fact that he's 40, probably not. Probably not. Hit the link if you want to give your opinion pertaining to Jussie Smollett, where this case is going on appeal. Will he get off? Will he walk free? Will the court say it was double jeopardy? They gave him 2 dual punishments, and he's to walk free and keep it moving. And also, is there a linkage to homosexuality in men and lying? That is my topic for tonight. Thank you for joining me. It'll probably be less than 2 years, dear, because he's on a roll now, especially since the court has let him out. The appellate court let him free on bond. He's feeling himself now. He really thinks his boo-boo doesn't stink. So there'll be some new mess before 2 years. You can put your money on that. He's feeling himself now. He feels like he's won already. To be clear, this phenomenon is not common. As New York reported last week, false hate crime reports are rare, and actual hate crimes are both frequent and likely underreported. Both of those statements are also true for rape. So when false reports of crimes like these do happen, think Jackie from Rolling Stone 2014 debunked a rape on campus story, or the University of Michigan Muslim student who claimed in 2016 that white men threatened to set her on fire. We have to ask, why? Jason DeBro, PhD, criminologist who has many thoughts on this topic. Before becoming a school counseling coordinator in Greenwood Village, Colorado, DeBrow earned a master's in psychology and a doctorate in criminology, and his research at the University of South Florida focused on how personality traits relate to different forms of deception. DeBrow has studied people who lie about being victims of crimes, but he admits that this doesn't really happen often enough to find patterns or common threads. The sample size is really small, and this isn't discussed frequently in the psychology or the criminology communities, he tells Health. Honestly, I think the reasons for doing something like this run the whole gamut. One reason someone might fake a crime like this is obviously to get noticed. Narcissism is definitely one trait that we can link to some of these cases. A desperate need for attention and adoration, DeBrow says. Antagonism is another trait that's likely to be involved, he says. Antagonistic behaviors include hostility, I did look that word up, callousness, and a lack of empathy toward others. This may explain what allows people to make up lies that can have such serious implications for other people and for society as a whole. The amount of manpower that's lost by police departments tracking down false leads, sorting out these lies is highly problematic, says DeBrow. And it affects so many lives. In some cases, there are people falsely accused on death row because of things like this. It's likely that most people who make up these kinds of crimes are fully aware that they're lying. And let me reiterate, his lawyers let that be known in their commentary on that I aired just now on Court TV. Imagine you being arrested and accused of a crime that you did not commit. And basically that's what they're trying to compare Mr. Smollett is to an innocent bystander who's been accused of making up such bullshit. But we already know he's concocted this farce. So it's not a matter of someone getting arrested, going to jail for a long time and or the death row. To me, that is not the same. Because we have two able-bodied people who went along with the farce and admitted their part. So it's not the same as going up, picking a black man out saying, he raped me, he stole my purse, he beat me up. And there's only one person giving the testimony of the said alleged assault. So Mr. African black man who's representing Smollett, how dare you even go there? Because it is not the same. We know we can be pulled into court for misdeeds that we didn't commit. Somebody misidentified us. Somebody white looked at us and said, oh, that's that lady, that's that guy, and misidentified us. Yes, we know there are high stats of blacks incarcerated by misidentification from white people. We know this, but that is not the case with Jussie Smollett. Two black people pointed to that mixed race black man and said he concocted this farce. We went along with him. So, sir, it is not the same. I had to throw that in there. Excuse my manners. As it says, it's likely that most people who make up these kinds of crimes are fully aware that they are lying. But DeBrow says there's also the chance that they truly believe the incident in question happened to them. There's a condition called pseudology of fantastica, in which people come up with outrageous lies and really becomes their reality, he says. It's legitimately in their head as something that happened. Boy, that's interesting. Some people also believe that the end of the goal of a false report, raising awareness about a very real society issue like racism, homophobia, or sexual assault, justifies the means, says DeBrow. It's possible they experienced these wrongs in the past and justice wasn't served. They may feel that this is the only way they can be vindicated. Very interesting. So could this be that Mr. Smollett was the victim of a so-called allegation, and this is his way of getting back at the general public, law enforcement, the world? You're going to look at me now because something happened to me a long time ago. And that could be it. Who's to say? I'm very glad I read this article, but this is very interesting information. Are we now talking about a past grievance that Mr. Smollett has with the world? And now he wants revenge on society. We haven't looked at him the way he feels he should have been looked at, validated. And that goes back to the monies he felt he was due by the honchos over at the studio. I'm worth this amount and I want it. But as my daddy would say to me, he's gone now. He said, if you had $1 million, it still wouldn't be enough. Exactly. How much is enough? Because let's say he made $2 million from his role and he wanted to make $4 million. If indeed the studio gave him 4, you can best believe Smollett would come back with his tail between his legs begging for more the next year. Why not? You gave me 4 now give me 6. Give me 7. Stay woke. Thank you for joining me. I will continue reading. As this article is saying, that possible the people experienced wrongs in the past and justice wasn't served, they may feel that this is the only way they can be vindicated. There's not much scientific literature on this type of lying, but some research does suggest that people may consider lying to be less unethical when they do it out of loyalty to a group they're part of, even if it has potential to hurt other people outside of that group. Then there's the issue of what deceitfulness does to the brain. Studies with functional MRIs have shown that more people lie, the less their amygdala, the center of the emotional process in the brain, is activated. That was especially true when people told lies that benefited themselves. In other words, the brain gets used to lying and there's less conflict and pushback each time they do it. Some people get even get real pleasure out of manipulating others and pulling the wool over their eyes, says DeBrow. This phenomenon known as duping delight is often observed in people with narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathy. So, can people who lie about being the victim of a crime be diagnosed with and treated for a true mental health condition? That depends on the individual case, says DeBrow. And it's up to a patient's doctor to decide. Certainly, underlying issues like depression, anxiety, unhealthy coping mechanisms can be addressed through therapy if a person is willing to seek help. I do think that cognitively, most people can understand that what they're doing is wrong and that it can really hurt people, he says. But I also don't know if in the heat of the moment, if that's graspable for some people. Personality traits like narcissism are ingrained. Let me repeat that. Personality traits like narcissism are ingrained, he adds, and most psychiatrists believe there's a limit to how much these traits can be treated or changed. The bottom line is that in most cases, we'll never really understand exactly why people fake crimes like this. I caution people to reserve judgment, he says. We really don't know organically where the person's brain is, and we don't know enough about their past, traumatic experiences, or lack thereof that might have contributed to this. It's easy to be angry at people who lie about being victims of crimes, he adds, and in many cases, that anger is absolutely justified. But until they sit down with a professional, and even then, it is very difficult to assess what's really going on, he says. Health.com is the source. Now, this was a very good piece of information. If any of you needing to see verification for this was uploaded March 5th, 2020. A psychologist explains what might motivate a person to pretend to be a crime victim. It says, but why at the top? Jussie Smollett lied about being the victim of a hate crime, police say. Why would someone do that? This article is by Amanda Macmillan. If you need verification for this information, Health is the source of this article. Thank you all so much for joining me. Very interesting information. That's probably the best piece of information I've read pertaining to someone lying and making up stuff. And yes, it hurts people. Because in the end, some could say, well, it's a crime that hurt whom? Well, it hurt the city of Chicago because many people there liked the show. The detectives, we heard them, they worked. They worked during the winter months chasing ghosts. People filing paperwork, police department, court system. You see, somebody has to do the shuffling of the paperwork for those that don't think it was no big deal. It's a job. Some would say, well, they do that anyway. Well, that's not the point. Why would I want to shuffle extra paperwork on a lie? Stay woke. Just imagine if 50, 60 people walked into the police department filing fake crimes today. Somebody has to take the notes down. Somebody has to type up the memo. Somebody's got to put the information in the computer. Somebody's got to call a detective. A detective have to go find. Now the detectives have to do the footwork. Now they've got to do the phone work. So I'll ask you again, who are they hurting by spinning the lie? They're hurting anybody that's involved in investigating the case. Anybody that has to shuffle the paperwork, type in the information and put it in the computer. And God forbid it goes past the detective's desk into the courtroom. And they identify someone who they know damn well never touched them. Now you have a new ball game of sending someone up the creek who never laid a hand on you. And that's how sick the story can go. Well, he probably won't get lucky, dear. He's not lucky now. He may think he's lucky. He may even feel vindicated because the appellate court said, we'll give you a bond and let you go free. But see, this is how stupid Jussie Smollett is. And listen to me very carefully when I say what I'm going to tell you. He is the biggest fool walking right now. You think you're getting off by walking free, but you still had to pay the court a full $150,000 racks of change to get up out that jail. So really, you are a dummy. Because you see, even if, let's say, the appellate court says it was double jeopardy, he doesn't have to do jail time. Don't even have to pay the money back, because I don't even know how that's going to go. You still had to pay $150,000 to get up out of the jail. So, Jussie Smollett, you're not as bright as you think you are. You've just been hoodwinked and bamboozled out of giving up 150 racks, 50,000 racks. You didn't think about that, did you? You see, the judge told you to pay $120 to the city of Chicago for your fake crime and $25,000 in a fine to the courts. So $120 in restitution to the city and $25,000 in fines to the city. And your dumb ass just gave up $150,000 racks for a bond. You couldn't even get your 10 back. And you think that no matter what happens with the appellate court, the city of Chicago is going to reimburse the $150. Try again. And that's not including what you're paying those 4 lovelies that stood in court and hooping and hollering outside about the injustices of the double jeopardy clause. You still have to pay those people and continue to pay them to fight the good fight for this appeal. You really are not bright, because you see all the money you have now wasted, $10,000 originally, $150,000 last week. The money's to continue to pay all 4 of those black folks representing you. All the money you have to pay to the court to gather the paperwork and the information. You are the biggest loser, Jussie Smollett. No matter what the appellate court decides. Because all the money you're sinking into those lawyers and paper shuffling, you could be working your job and your craft, but you chose not to because you're a deviant. You're a deviant. Your mind's not right. Your soul and your spirit's not right. And it's sickening. It's very sickening. Thank you for joining me. That's the gist of my information this early morning in the high 10, almost 1:30 here. God is good. Happy spring to all of you. Today is the first day of spring. Hope you all are having a wonderful and safe weekend. It started to drizzle last night and got a bit cold here in East Tennessee. But I wanted to bring you this information because I felt like it needed to be mentioned, that perhaps this is deeper than just a faux crime, somebody wanting attention. Could this be something genetic with this man being a homosexual? May we dive a little bit deeper into the belly of the beast, that it's just not wanting attention, that is something much deeper than him wanting attention. Because there are a lot of people that want fame, money, accolades, be number one. But do they go to this extent to try to attain the unattainable? And I brought you that information saying that that is one of the reasons to lie, is to get something that is unattainable. So is that true? Because the rumor is that he wanted a higher pay. I don't even know who came out with that rumor, because I haven't gotten a receipt that that's even true. So let's just say that it is, hypothetically speaking. What was the end result again? This mess right here. You did all of this, defamed your own self to get a higher pay, when you were fortunate to even have the role that was appointed to you, and you were displeased with the pay. So look at you now. So what I'd like to say to Jussie Smollett is that, was it worth it? This farce that you concocted, was it worth it? Was it worth it? Where you sit today in the wee hour, if you're even up right now, was it worth it? Having people make jokes about you, talk about you, despise you, have no faith in you as a human being, was it worth it? Because see, that's what you have to ask yourself now, Jussie Smollett. In the quietness of yourself and being, when there's nobody around and no cameras and nobody to listen at your bullshit and the bullshit from your lawyers and your family members ranting and raving on television with an eye and an ear, in your quiet space now to yourself, walking free on a $150,000 cash bond, was it worth it? Because in the end, no matter what the appellate court rules, you will still be that lying Negro that spun this web about nothing. And that is something, my dear sweetie pie, you can't do a damn thing about. And it doesn't matter what the appellate court says about jail time, restitution, fines, community service, probation, whichsoever. However, it was rendered from court last week for your ass to pay monies back, 30 months probation, 5 months in jail. You can't possibly undo what you have done to yourself and what people currently think of you. Now, maybe somewhere down the road, 6, 7 years from now, when your name is no longer on the TV screens, some people may turn and favor you and say, well, that was a long time ago. Let's give him another chance. For your sake, you better hope that some people will forget about you, or forget about what you did and turn the other cheek and give you another chance. And also let you perfect your craft. When I was in high school, I was a senior, and I had a Caucasian friend, acquaintance, that I would ride around with after school hours. We would drive all around the city and outside of the city limits, going different places, eating ice cream, just doing, young people things. But the one thing I learned about this friend of mine, he was feminine, hadn't come out of a closet or anything yet because he was still a child, teenager. But the one thing about him is that he lied a lot. And that was something I think back to with Jussie Smollett, Andrew Cunanan, and other homosexual men who I've known to be pathological liars. This kid lied about everything. I don't think anything that he ever said was the truth. Ever. We once went to a very, very expensive home. Can't reveal the place as to keep down rumors, but it was gated. And he pulled up outside the gate of this home, talking through the monitor box, intercom rather, acting as if he's, trying to get into the gate, telling the person, hey, let me in. Basically, I believe he was acting like he was talking to the maid. Even now repeating this, I realized how sick this person was at that time. Such and such, open the gate, let me in, I'm trying to get in, I don't have my key, nonsense. Now, besides watching this person fumble around with this talking box, the thing he didn't know is that I knew he was lying. And I knew that he did not live in this fancy house behind this gate. Because you see, he had already taken me to another subdivision and claimed this other house that sat up on a hill was his house. But you see, when people lie, they forget the lies that they have told. So I'm sitting inside of this car watching this fool pretend to be talking into an intercom system, pretending he's talking to the maid to let him in. He's locked out. When he finally decided to stop talking through that box, which we already know he probably wasn't pressing the buttons anyway, he gets in, going on and on about how he's locked out, blah, blah, blah. And I finally told him directly, I said, you don't have to keep lying to me about where you live. Frankly, I don't know where you live. I assume you live somewhere in our town. You have a nice little car that you drive. Why do you need to lie about where you live and who you are? And he still, no, it's the truth. I live there. I'm locked out. And I do believe I mentioned to him that you forgot you've taken me to another house where you said you stayed there. So which is it? Because it can't be both. I think of this person periodically when I come across homosexual men who I've known to lie or hear stories about gay men who spin elaborate webs. And I think back to high school of this person. The lies were extensive. And that was one reason why a lot of young people didn't like him in school, because they knew he lied. He talked to hear himself. So here we have a teenager spinning webs about where he lived, thinking the queen is dumb even at this age, and you should know that I wasn't. I've already confronted him and told him he doesn't need to lie to make friends. We'll like you just the way you are, but who are you? Because at this point, we don't know who you are because you lie so much. Factor in, it's now spring break. We go into spring break. This is, like I said, my senior year. Come back. He tells me he has something for me that he got in Paris, France. He brings me back a jade Fabergé egg, Oriental egg, that sat on a little cherry wood stand. Very small little Fabergé egg, jade. It was a jade egg. I was appreciative. I was thankful. Thank you. But I told him, I don't believe you went to Paris, France. And I don't believe you got this gift from Paris, France. And why are you now still lying, telling more lies? Once again, no, I went to Paris. I did. He lied and say his father had his own private plane. I think once he showed me a picture of his dad outside of a, small airplane. And I would just shake my head saying to myself, when is this child going to stop spinning these damn lies? Because I'm not impressed. Because you have yet to take me to this fancy, elaborate house. You've taken me to at least 2 houses, claiming that they're your homes. I know you're lying. But he couldn't understand that people will like you if they knew you for who you are or who they think you to be. But see, that's the thing about life, is that everything is about perception. That you really don't know anything about anybody, and people can tell you anything and pretend to be anything. I'm going to fast forward after high school. He once asked me to spend the night at his aunt's house. So we go to this house, and it's a regular rancher with a basement, nicely decorated, not a bad looking home, to my knowledge, to what a little I could see of it, because I went downstairs, I think, to a bottom door to what would be considered a furnished basement area. And I slept in a room, and he slept in another room. And all along, it dawned on me that this house where I was sleeping was his house. But somehow in his mind, he's still spinning the lie that this is a relative's house. The relative was out of town, the aunt. He's keeping her house for her. And he decided to let me come over and spend the night. But I knew that was his house. He kept me up the entire night. I couldn't even get any sleep because he just wanted to talk. And that's why I knew it was his house. Because he was afraid somebody probably would pop up, show up. And then he was rushing me out of there early the next morning. So that's when I definitely knew it was not his aunt's house. That indeed it was his house. And his brother still lived there, younger brother, because I do believe he mentioned a brother. And he probably was worried that the brother would come home and wonder who the hell is this black girl doing sleeping in their basement. When I look back on that, I can laugh, but I also can shake my head to how sad this human being was then. Now, mind you, years go by. We're a little bit older. I'm in my 20s. We reconnect. And at this point, he's now come out of the closet and has let me know he is a homosexual male. But even then, that friendship, as we're a few years older than high school, to me, he still was dramatic, still full of bullshit, still always got something going on, always got fables and tales. Once asked me to move to Florida with him. And I said, why would I do that? Why would I want to move to Florida? For what? Oh, you could come down here and stay with me and blah, blah, blah. And this is after he had, years after we had reconnected and he had moved back, had moved to Florida. I said to myself, I'm not going to go to Florida and stay with anybody. I said, because what I think back to is all these stories you've told me from high school and how you still were lying after high school. And you think I would pack up my belongings to move to Florida to stay with you, to get myself wrapped up in some drama? I don't think so. And the fact that he said his mother still came to see him And I think he said she had a key. And I thought that was strange. I said, well, wait a minute. You're grown now. Why would your mother have a key to your apartment? And I could have sworn he said she would come and stay sometime. So then that had my mind wandering. Well, damn. Is the apartment in her name? Did she come down, you know what I'm saying, on the weekends or every other month to stay in this apartment or studio with him? It was just strange. So it jogged my memory back to that night I spent the night at the alleged aunt's house. And I realized that wasn't his aunt's house. That was his house. And he didn't know that I knew that it was his house. So now you fast forward years later, we're grown. And he's talking about, hey, come down here to Florida and move in with me. But then the stipulation is, I don't know where you'd go when my mom shows up. And I'm like, okay, well, if your mom shows up, your mom shows up. Well, what does that have to do with the queen? So see, it was like back to the old shuffle of lies. And then it dawned on me, this person, you could never truly, genuinely reach and be a true, genuine friend to him because you don't know who the hell you're talking to. And that's a terrible way to live. One is to just constantly lie, spin lies, and then be the receiver of the lies, such as myself. And at some point, he still didn't get it that Queen knew he was still a pathological liar, but now he's older. And that conversation was 30 years ago. And I remember it was probably 2010, I think. 9 or 10. I was in Target shopping. And he walked right by me. And I didn't even run out of breath to say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? My better half told me, let him walk on by and pretend you didn't even see him walk by you. Because if you were to start a conversation, you'd be right back to like it was when you were a young person dealing with him. You wouldn't know what is the truth and not the truth. Because 9 times out of 10, he's still fabricating and making up stuff and lying. And who wants to deal with that? Almost 40 years of age. Nobody. That's the question I have pertaining to Jussie Smollett and him being gay. Is there some type of linkage to the homosexuality and lying? What are the stats of homosexual men being pathological liars? And as I said, it's not to throw shade to anyone that's gay, but this is about a gay man. And I'm speaking from experience in dealing with gay men, that I've come across many who lied a lot and made up stories about people, situations. And as I brought you commentary pertaining to Andrew Cunanan, he was a known liar and a manipulator. And that is how he got his follies. It's by making people believe he was more than what he was. And that is exactly what this person did that I knew from high school. He lied because he wanted us, people in school, to think he had more than what he had. He was never happy with his upbringing and how he lived. And he wanted to be a wealthy person, such as Andrew Cunanan. And that's why he made up the wild stories of living in a mansion, having a maid, his father owning an airplane, flying across the world and the country in this plane. This person wanted to be a wealthy person. And he wanted us to believe he was this wealthy person and that he had more than the average. So somewhere in his sick mind, he was not content with who he was and where he came from and his parents. I learned during those lies from a relative that worked at the hospital and saw his mother. And that's how I learned. I guess it probably was after high school that the mother worked at the hospital. I don't know what type of position she had, if it was administrative or what. But my relative told me, oh, his mother works at the hospital. You didn't know that? And I said, no, I didn't know that. And she was like, yeah, I see her from time to time in the hospital, because my relative worked at the hospital at that time. And so I got to learn a little bit about him, that his mother worked at the hospital. Now, mind you, I don't know if I remember him ever telling me that in high school. He may have, but it was interesting hearing from somebody else who saw his mom. But I do remember he would tell me, and this is interesting, this point, is that his mother, I believe, was racist. Now, who's to say if that is true? Because I don't remember this relative ever telling me that the woman was nasty or mean, to my recollection. So I always wondered, was his mother a racist? Or was that just another lie that he spun? Because as I said, he was not a happy person. He didn't like his life, the life that was given to him by his parents, because his parents were divorced, from my understanding. But hell, do we even know that's the truth? Because as I said, he kept a lot hidden in that short time that I knew him. And I do remember now him saying that his mother was racist, and that's why he couldn't bring me around. She died. She knew I had a black friend, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that's the truth. I don't think his mother was racist. I think it was just a matter of he was a very unhappy person. He didn't like his life, and he didn't want anyone to know anything about him personally. His parents, brothers, sisters, where he lived, how he lived. And that's the one thing you have to tell yourself about a liar, is if they'll lie about one thing, they'll lie about another. And you don't know who you're talking to. Now, I don't know if he, at the age of 50, is still a liar, because he was 1 year younger than myself. But it would be sad to know that all those years of him lying to me, that he is now a 50-year-old man and still a pathological liar. And as I've told you and brought you commentary pertaining to Andrew Cunanan, that his lies started at possibly preteen, because he wanted to be more than what he was, and he was pumped up by his parents to be a great person, that he fed into the lies that his parents fed him, boosting his ego, and he became a diabolical human being. And there are many people like Andrew Cunanan. They may not have murdered anyone, but they cannot tell the truth. And they're not happy with themselves. They're not happy with being a regular Joe, a regular Bob. They have to put on, they have to fabricate, embellish, lie, deceive. And that is the thing about lying, is that eventually they will find you out. Now, naturally, people will not divulge certain things because they don't want people in their business. That is your prerogative. Everyone deserves privacy about his or her own personal life and dealings. But when you verbally tell just blatant lies over and over and add things onto it, there's something wrong with you. Whether you're a man, woman, gay, bisexual, transgender, whatever, there's something deeply disturbing inside of your spirit. But you can't tell the truth. And those people, to me, are scary. Because what you always have to tell yourself is, how far are you willing to carry the lie? How far are you willing to carry the lie? Are you willing to steal for the lie? Con for the lie? Kill for the lie? How far will your lies take you? And that is the point. And with Jussie Smollett, one would have to ask themselves at this point, at 40 years of age, how far is he willing to go to continue this farce and carry the lie? January 29th, 2019. Where will it stop? And when will it stop? It probably never will. That's why I said it won't even matter what the appellate court decides. He will still continue to say that he was accosted by two white men in MAGA hats, even though we know that it never happened. If you'd like to donate to the channel, $Beganji129 Cash App. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you, Ramisha, for the wonderful donations. Thank you. God bless you, sweetheart. Praying for you, praying for everyone in the chat, new subs, guests, those just dropping by to check out the content. God bless all of you. Happy spring. Today's the first day of spring. Hope you all have a prosperous new week, and pray for the Queen as well. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you for joining me.